morning, good afternoon, good evening. Hey, Jeffrey, good to see you, brother. This is the Studio Q Show Live. My name is Quinn Jacobson. If you don't know that by now, I don't know, maybe you haven't been watching or listening, but we've been doing this for a couple of weeks now. We cover mostly wet collodion stuff. Sometimes we deviate, but today we're going to go into some pop printing or printing out processes. I'm going to do a little series on this. So if you're with me, hang in there for 2 or 3 weeks. I think by the time I get finished with this printing, maybe even before, my darkroom stuff will be finished. So I'm excited to take this journey with you. And if you don't know what pop printing is, you're gonna learn something today. Hello, Steve Wilson. Good to see you, brother. And Tim Fry's in here. Hey, Linda from Sweden. Welcome back. I haven't seen you for a minute. Good to see everybody coming in. So let's just jump right in here. I appreciate Jeffrey in the room with me live here. Always good to see him. We're going to jump over and do this whole get me on board thing. My little slideshow. So look at this. It's November 6th, 2021. This is a Saturday. And wow, up here on the mountain, we've got almost 20 degrees Celsius, sunny today. Yesterday was the same. Tomorrow it's beautiful. Just getting a lot of things done. It's really beautiful weather. I hope everyone is healthy and happy and enjoying some of that weather as well too. Hey, Peter Schrager, good to see you, brother. So anyway, it's Saturday, the 6th of November. Welcome. We're going to look at printing out paper processes, POP, part 1. This is going to be from James Reilly's book. And if you don't have this, you need to get it. This is a great book, printed in 1980-ish. 1980, Light Impressions, Rochester, New York. It's the Albumen and Salted Paper Book, The History and Practice of Photographic Printing, 1840 to 1895. Excellent book. And you'll see some of that. Quality as we go through this little exercise today. Linda says, I've been working, but glad to be back watching. Oh, great. Well, I know work's important, isn't it? So we're happy to have you back. Thanks for joining us, Linda. News and social media. I'm just going to give you a couple little updates of my personal stuff. Technical questions, recommended reading, recommended watching. That's pretty straightforward. Well, look at here. Here's my darkroom coming along. Every day we poke and prod and hang and nail and screw and align and wire and all this stuff. We're almost there. I don't want to jinx myself, but I say a week I'll be in my darkroom, or maybe 2, depending if we keep getting this weather. Yeah, we'll get it done. So that's kind of a little bit of a it's a challenge because we're doing everything else too, so it's a process, not an event. But man, I love it. I can't wait to get in there. You see my little my spinning darkroom door, and right below that there's a propane tank, a little heater there. But right there on the bottom right corner, that large photograph on the left is a solar system called an EcoFlow Delta 1500 watt system. I charge that with solar panels, and it runs my light in the darkroom. The darkroom has 3 lights, 2 red and 1 white. The white one's in the middle, and the 2 end ones will be red. I got switches. I got it all wired. My sinks are marked out. I'm going to try to do that plumbing stuff probably tomorrow. We're going to finish the little pieces today on the drywall and get the plumbing in. And then it's mudding and taping and painting. So, yeah, there's a little bit of an update there anyway. So that's where I'm at on that. I talked last week about I ordered 2 additional plate holders for dry plate work from Chamonix. They're a couple of months out on producing anything. I don't know if it's supply chain, demand, all this stuff going on. I don't know if anybody's experiencing that stuff. I know I am. But Dale Wilson mentioned, hey, you should get a changing bag. And I thought, yeah, that's a great idea. So this is what I did. I ordered this changing bag. It's about 70 centimeters by 70 centimeters, more or less. Look big. It's a big one. My plate holders are 10 by 10. They got pop-off back. They're not the sliding kind, right? You pop the back up, put the plate in. And I also got 100 pack of these black Mylar foil bags. You can see the size on them. They're 26 centimeters by 18 centimeters. I'm doing whole plate, which is 6.5 by 8.5 inches. Dry plate, especially albumen, it's going to be tough. I don't have to worry about scratching it or doing so much damage. That way, this way I could prepare 10 plates, take it out to the field, load it in the bag, just one holder, one have one back, and boom, boom, boom. Peter says Pictographica has them. What do they have, Peter? You mean plate holders or backs or what? Let me know. So I went ahead and popped on this. It was, what was it, $60 for everything, I guess. 100 bags, this changing bag. I'm going to try it. I will definitely follow up and let you know if it's doable or works or not. This would be great to have 10 plates in Mylar bags, take them out, load them up in the back, unload them, load them in, and I'll have to come up with a methodology of how to mark the ones that have been exposed and not, and et cetera, and all the details on them. But I got that. They have holders. Do you have what's their website? I'll check them out. Do they have for the Chamonix holders, huh? Well, we'll see. So that's where I'm at. Darkroom bag and foil pouches. I'll try it for $60. I'm not going to be out much if it doesn't work. So let's talk about printing out processes, or P.O.P. This is what this is. This is from the Steve Anshell's book, The Darkroom Cookbook on Printing Out Processes. So what does printing out mean? The term printing out paper and the associated initials P.O.P. And that's what you'll see a lot. You'll just see P.O.P. without even the dots in there. Yes, Linda, the bags are reusable. Absolutely. Yeah. There's 100 of them. That's the least amount you could get. So yeah, they're reusable. I'll find a way to mark them and, unexposed, exposed plates, and just filter them through, maybe take 10 out at a time. Yeah, they're definitely reusable. They're Mylar foil bags. They're for food, smell proof, blah, 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 all that stuff. And I know they're light proof. So yeah, good question though. So printing out processes, or printing out paper. P.O.P. was introduced in 1891 by the Ilford Company for their gelatin chloride papers. This is really interesting because this is the Chicago Albumen Works stuff, the gelatin chloride papers, the Aristotypes. The stuff in my book, the gelatin Aristotypes, are that very process right there. That's where the word P.O.P. came from, or printing out process. The term has since been applied to any paper that requires ultraviolet light to form a complete image. We're going to talk about how this works as well, too. The use of printing out papers is a time-honored method for making inexpensive prints without a darkroom. Indeed, prior to the 1880s, these papers were the most popular method for obtaining photographic prints. The printing technique is simple. The paper is contact printed with a negative using the sun for a light source to make a visible image without development. A UV lamp available from grocery store and hardware stores can also be used. Exactly. So that's the other part of it, right? There's not just the sun involved. There's also, we have now the UV light system. So, hey, welcome, Boguslav. Good to see you, brother. There are several different printing out papers, including salted paper, albumen, gelatin chloride, Collodio-Chloride, we know, differing in the medium used to suspend the light-sensitive substance, or the binder. I call it the binder. And if the sensitizer is applied in the salting solution as in an emulsion, and we'll talk about the difference what an emulsion is versus the other, or as a second step. In salted paper, the silver is held by the fibers of the paper. Well, I will disagree with that just a little bit. I read this when I first got it, and they're not really suspended. He says the silver is held by the fibers of the paper. Maybe, you have gelatin in a salt print, right? That's your binder basically. And so I would say it's suspended by the gelatin, albeit very thin, and some in the paper. That's why the salt prints look the way they do, right? You do get down into the fibers. So I kind of understand there, but I think he's making the contrast here. In salted paper, the silver is held by the fibers of the light paper, while albumen papers use egg whites as the binder. Gelatin chloride papers suspend the silver in a gelatin layer, and Collodio-Chloride uses a binder of collodion. Well, I added that. It's nitrocellulose, right? The basic light-sensitive substance used in all these papers is silver chloride. with an excess of silver nitrate. Once the image has been printed and toned, the rest of the procedure is like handling a silver print. It's fixed, washed, dried, preserved much the same way. Because the silver particles of the printed out image are much finer size than those developed out prints and developing out prints, right? Kodak, Ilford, the ones you use chemicals on, they are more susceptible to deterioration or to degrade, right? But with the proper processing, they will stand the test of time as well as the originals. We'll talk about that too. That's not complete. He's making broad sweeps here, but generally it's good, right? Collodio-Chloride is actually the most stable silver printing process because of the nitrocellulose binder hermetically seals the silver from harmful atmosphere that fades all the silver-based photographic prints. In albumen, it's the egg whites that yellow, by the way, too. If they're washed properly and everything, it's the egg whites that can degrade and deteriorate. Printing out papers can only be contact printed, so there's no enlarger here, right? A good print for these papers require a dense negative with good shadow detail and clear base in the deepest shadows. Printing out papers rely on a technique called self-masking. This means that the thin areas of the negative allow the light to quickly darken the paper and block light from reaching the lower layers of the sensitive surface. That's self-masking. That's a beautiful thing about P.O.P. The result is the shadow areas are held back slightly, allowing the highlights of the pictures to print or get detail. So that's a quick overview of what it is. Oh, Bogus Law, sorry, I'm like the Paul, and we have the time change. Oh, we have the time change next. Wait, we have the time change tonight. Yeah, that's right. I don't know. God, I hate it. I hate this daylight savings stuff. I hope they change that. And Peter says Pictorio Graphica is the correct. Okay, I'll check that out. Thank you, Peter. I appreciate that. I'll check that out. So that's, again, the darkroom cookbook printing out process. Decent overview. This is really good. The Albumen Salted Paper Book. If you don't have this, go download it. 1980 Light Impressions. It is a wonderful book. It's just, I can't say enough about it. And here's James, Mr. Reilly's presentation. Printing with silver salts. The process described in this book are all based on the fact that salts of silver are light sensitive. That is, they chemically dissociate and form particles of silver metal in the presence of light energy. So right off the bat, he's telling you what the bottom line up front is. This is what we're dealing with. They chemically dissociate from and form particles of silver metal in the presence of light energy. Silver salts have provided the basis for most photographic materials over the entire course of photographic history. Many other light-sensitive substances are known, of course, and many of them, notably iron, platinum, chromium, salts, as well as recently discovered photosensitive polymers, serve as the foundation for useful photographic printing materials. But they're different, right? They're different than silver. But all these systems lack the versatility of silver salts. So true. Used singly or in combination, compounds of silver can produce a great variety of negative and positive images. So true. There are two large families of evolutionary strains of silver printing papers, differentiated by the way in which the image is formed. Most modern photographic papers belong to the class of materials known as develop out papers, which means that the image is formed by the chemical reduction of the silver particles after a brief exposure to light. We're talking the enlarger, the 35 millimeter negatives, the Kodak paper, the Ilford paper. Those are modern developed out papers, using chemical to reduce those silver particles. Of course, all practical negative materials have been of the develop out variety, since the chief advantage of this approach is that only a small amount of light energy is needed to create the image. Less well known is the fact that only since about 1905 have most printing papers been out of the develop out variety. So he's just giving a little history there, the foundation, really good overview, really good stuff. Printing out papers. For the first 65 years of photographic history, the chief method of producing prints was by means of the printing out processes, wherein the image is formed by the action of light energy alone, without chemical development. Obviously, more light energy is needed than with develop out materials, in some cases 100,000 times more. So you wonder, somebody contacted me a while ago, hey, can I use an enlarger and do these? You know, if you have a few weeks or a few days, you might be able to get a little something to show up, but I doubt it. This is a sun or a UV, way down in the UV nanometer range, really powerful lights, or light source, the type of light, UV, and or the amount of light. So, or in both cases. Historically, this meant that for printing out papers, daylight was the only practical light source. And even now, it remains the cheapest and most satisfactory source in cases where mass production is not required. Printing out papers are almost unknown today. This is in 1980, but they are still sold for the purpose of obtaining quick proofs of portrait negatives. Again, we go back to the Chicago Albumen works, the gelatin Aristotypes, gelatin chloride. That's what he's talking about there. I think I've told you this story before. When I lived in Europe, I bought the last box in Rotterdam at the photo store of the Chicago Albumen Works paper, and I held that for a couple of years, and I was just it was just beautiful stuff. I wish they still had it, though. Even this application is dwindling as color continues to grow in importance in the photographic industry. Printing out papers possess the advantage that because the image appears during exposure, the progress of exposure may be checked visually and stopped at the right moment. Another advantage of printing out papers is that they have a very long tonal range and can successfully reproduce detail from negatives of greater density than develop out papers can. Try to take a good albumen or salt wet collodion negative and print that out on modern silver gelatin develop out paper. You'll see what he means there. In general, negatives that produce good prints on printing out papers are too contrasty for even the softest grades of develop out papers. The biggest disadvantage of printing out papers from the modern point of view is that their inability to produce prints by enlargement. So this is all contact printing, right? The amount of light energy required to enlarge onto printing out papers is enormous and impractical. So all prints must be made by contact, meaning you have to have the negative on the paper. That's the size of print you're going to get. There's no putting the negative in an enlarger and expanding it and making a larger print. Classifications of printing out papers. Within the large class of printing out papers, there are two smaller classes or subdivisions: emulsion papers and salted papers. This is what I was talking about a minute ago. The differences between them come from the way in which the paper is rendered light sensitive. Although both kinds depend on the same light sensitive substance, silver chloride. Salted papers are made in a two-step process whereby the salt, usually ammonium or sodium chloride, table salt, let's say, is first applied to the paper, then converted to silver chloride by a treatment with silver nitrate solution. Emulsion papers are made by a one-step process of coating paper with silver chloride already formed and dispersed in an emulsion. A good case of this is Collodio-Chloride, right? You're spinning that strontium chloride and collodion and all that stuff up into the collodion. You're making an emulsion. It's already mixed in. The two-step is separate. The emulsions, those are salted paper. The emulsions are together. That's why some people get hung up on these words and what emulsion means and all that stuff. And this is technically what it means. Emulsion papers are made by a one-step coating the paper with silver chloride already formed and dispersed in an emulsion. The making and coating of emulsions is best done by machine, although it is possible to produce emulsion papers by hand on a small scale. For sure. We do Collodio-Chloride, Gelatin Chloride, absolutely. The salted papers are eminently more practical to produce on a small scale basis, however, and are capable of widely and varied range of effects, textures, colors, and contrast. I think they all are, but we'll talk about that. This book is about papers that belong to the category of salted papers, using the term in its technical sense defined above. Just to clarify that, right? The term salted paper can thus be taken to mean any handmade silver chloride printing out paper made in two steps. So what he's saying is he's not going to teach you how to spin emulsion, a Collodio-Chloride or a gelatin or whatever emulsion-based pot paper. He's doing the two-step, albumen and salt. That's what he's defining here. Made in two steps, a salting step and a sensitizing step. The fact that the two operations of salting and sensitizing are separate allows a much wider choice of materials to be used as a binder in which to disperse the silver chloride and keep the image on the surface of the paper. Many materials, mostly notably albumen, are unsuitable for emulsion making, yet are useful for salted papers. It is necessary here to mention that although albumen paper is a salted paper in the technical sense of the term, most people reserve the term salted paper to describe any handmade silver printing out paper other than albumen paper, because albumen paper has such a high status, right? It doesn't want to be called a salted paper. You know, it's got this high status. So that's what he's talking about here. This ambiguity has arisen. Here it is. This ambiguity has arisen because albumen paper has such a towering historical importance that it is usually talked about separately from all other salted papers, though it does actually belong to that class of materials. So just that's some good information. You know, it's always good to take this stuff in and understand the history of this stuff that you're working with. So let's talk about the characteristics of printing out papers. Hey, Collodionista. Hello. Good to see you. The characteristics of printing out papers of all kinds differ greatly from those of the develop out materials. The most obvious difference is that of image color. This is a huge thing. While developed images generally are black, sometimes with a greenish or blue cast, the color of printing out papers after fixation is usually yellow or reddish brown. We all know that, right? And the difference from being in the contact frame and then going to the wash and then fix. Oh my God, what happened? I love that eggplant color. Where did it go? To most people, the color of the fixed printing out papers is not pleasant or agreeable. So a toning process is usually carried out prior to fixing. We'll talk about why he recommends prior to fixing versus after fixing, after you fix, which alters the color to brown, purplish brown, purple, or black. It is the basic mechanism of image formation and printing out papers, which is responsible for their color. So here it is. When silver chloride is acted upon by light, it dissociates it into component parts of silver and chlorine, and a tiny particle of metallic silver is formed. These tiny particles form larger aggregate particles that do not exceed a certain size and which are relatively much smaller than the filaments of silver that are generated in develop out papers by the action of the developing agent. The aggregate silver particles that are formed in printing out papers are of a size that chemists call colloidal, which means that they have special properties with respect to light. These particles are not large enough to absorb all wavelengths of light and thus appear black. Instead, they absorb some wavelengths but not others, depending in part on the index of refraction of the material in which the particles are dispersed. What is your binder, in other words, right? In practical terms, this means two things. First, different binders or vehicles used to carry the image, such as albumen, gelatin, or starch, will produce prints of different colors. Second, when the print is fixed, the color will change dramatically, since by dissolving the unreduced silver chloride present in the light-sensitive coating, the index of refraction of the whole system will be changed, and the silver particles will be packed close together more closely. These are the reasons why prints have a rich purple or brown color after exposure, change to a reddish or yellow brown in the fixed bath. Just like I said, when you're printing them out in your contact frame and you're peeking at them, boy, they're just gorgeous. That's what he says. He said these are the reasons why prints have a rich purple eggplant color or brown color after exposure to change to a reddish or yellow brown in the fixing bath. Usually an orange brown color, right, in the fix is what we normally see. After drying the prints again change color, becoming darker and colder in tone because the index of refraction of the system and the distances between the particles have changed, thus affecting which wavelengths of light are absorbed. Isn't that interesting? So we talk about how much this changes from your exposure to your wash, to your fix, to your tone, and to your dry down. These are all the way they're kicking, that light is kicking back, that index is kicking back the types of wavelengths which are absorbed or not. The fact that the colloidal silver image changes color depending on the nature of the vehicle or the binder material used on papers constitutes some means of controlling print color. But the toning process plays a greater role and provides more possibilities for control. That is fascinating stuff. If you've never read that or seen that, that is really good information. You have to kind of absorb it a little bit, but you'll get it. If you go back, read the book, you'll get it. Silver chloride. As stated above, it is light energy alone that reduces the silver salts to metallic silver and thus forms the image in printing out papers. While many compounds of silver exhibit the printout property, the most useful for printing papers is silver chloride. Silver chloride is insoluble in water and in most solvents, so it cannot simply be brushed on to make photographic paper. It kind of can, but that's okay. Not really, legitimately. It must be formed in place by a process first treating the paper with a soluble chloride like sodium chloride or table salt, and then treating it again with a solution of silver nitrate, that two-step process, right? The two chemicals react, forming silver chloride and sodium nitrate, right? This double decomposition always happens. We have these byproducts that we have to account for. One is good, which is silver chloride, and sodium nitrate, right, from the AgNO3, the latter of which takes no role in forming the image and either dissolves into the silver solution or is washed away in processing. Pure silver chloride paper is unsatisfactory for printing purposes because it produces gray and flat images. There you go. Now he backed up and he said that's why. Successful printing with silver chloride depends on the presence of two additional factors: active organic substances and excess silver nitrate. Now we're back in the wet collodion world, right? Now we're back into having all that free silver on your plate to be able to make an image. In photography, period. Both of these are needed to impart adequate sensitivity and a rich appearance to printing out papers. It was Fox Talbot, the inventor of the negative positive photography, who first realized the critical relationship between the relative amounts of chloride and silver nitrate. He found that when chloride and silver nitrate were present in equal amounts, his papers were hardly light sensitive at all, compared to when the silver nitrate was present in great excess. So you've got to have a lot of this free silver nitrate with the chloride. Talbot found that about 6 times more nitrate was necessary and established that the salting solution should be 2 to 4% in strength and the silver nitrate 12%. The reason why so much silver nitrate is necessary is explained by the great 19th century photochemist Hermann Vogel, who reasoned that as light energy disassociates each unit of silver chloride, the chlorine that is liberated simply unites with the silver nitrate present to form new silver chloride. The light breaks down this newly formed silver chloride, and the cycle begins again to be repeated over and over and over again. When excess silver nitrate is available, more image silver will be formed and a greater maximum density attained. That's great stuff right there, too. The role of organic binders. Experience has shown that certain organic substances have a very favorable effect on image formation and printing out papers. And these may be designated active organic substances. This is the other part he talked about in the previous page. The most important are albumen, gelatin, and organic acids such as citric, tartaric acid, and oxalic acid. These active organic materials facilitate the more complete reduction of silver chloride and also themselves form light-sensitive substances when in contact with silver. So again, he's talking about this chemical double decomposition there. With silver nitrate, silver albuminate, silver citrate, etc. those are the byproducts of it, which are somewhat light sensitive. There are many other organic substances used for printing out papers which are not active in the same way. That is, they do not facilitate more complete reduction of silver chloride, but definitely do make a contribution to the printing out paper by keeping the light sensitive material on the surface and preventing a dull, sunken in appearance. The most useful of those substances is starch, although lactose, agar-agar, and carrageenan or whatever, and resins. Those are the other ones that are useful, but not as so as the organic, have also been used for the purpose. Very interesting organic binders. One of the most basic dynamics with any photographic paper is the location of the light sensitive layer. That is, whether it's confined to the surface of the sheet or has penetrated deeply into the paper fibers. That's what he's talking about here, either having the image above the paper or somewhat and embedded into the paper. In the latter case, the maximum density obtainable on the material will be lowered and prints will have a matte surface, aka salt prints, right? Because the light reflected from the paper will be scattered and diffused by the paper fibers. If the image is produced in a compact layer resting on top of the paper fibers, this scattering is minimized and the maximum density obtainable is much greater. Also, if the light sensitive coating is itself composed of some smooth and transparent substance like gelatin or albumen, the scattering of light in the white area of the print will be minimized as well, and the paper will look more brilliant and have more contrast. All of the various binder materials used in salted paper papers perform the function of preventing the penetration of the image layer into the paper fibers, although the results also depend on the nature and the amount of binder used. I want to show you something here real quick. I briefly, that cover shot that we use in this week's the show here. I'll just show you these real quick. You saw them last week, but here's a salt print and here's an albumen print. Big difference. Exactly what he's talking about right there, right? Big difference. Big, huge. The way that the image sits into the paper, the brilliance, and the way the image looks, the brilliance, the density, all that stuff. So that's exactly what he's talking about there. Let's see if I can get back to my original here. No, this one. So that's what he's talking about, where it's laying on the paper, and the difference in salt prints and albumen prints are just ridiculous. I mean, they're a whole night and day. I mean, they have a little bit of toning difference too, but another benefit of keeping the image on the paper surface is a gain in sharpness. See that? And capacity to render fine detail. This is why albumen paper prints were so popular. The early history of printing paper shows steady evolution of techniques for producing papers capable of greater resolution and contrast, fueled by a desire to reproduce the fine detail present in negatives on wax paper and glass. A burrito paper, or if you use burrito paper, is great, right? You're right, Peter. It has that separation. That's what we put Collodio-Chloride emulsion on, is burrito paper. Exactly. Obviously, the basic smoothness of the raw paper stock has a great effect on the resultant print, and so does the amount of organic material coated onto the raw paper. You know, you're talking about how many layers you put on, like albumen, whatnot. Yeah, there you go. Albumen, for example, may be applied in pure form to produce a glossy print, or may be diluted to any strength with a corresponding loss of gloss, detail, and brilliance of the image. We talk about hardening that first layer on albumen paper and doing another layer and another layer, and you harden in between each layer. Man, you can get some unbelievably good-looking paper. That's what he's talking about there. So finally, let's talk relating theory to practice. The terminology and basic theoretical considerations described above are, of course, not enough to carry out the practice of making albumen and salted papers, but they do form a framework in which to begin work. The historical literature abounds with recipes for all sorts of salted papers, including some with very exotic ingredients and procedures. That's so true. With patience and care, most of them will work, quote unquote. The difficult part of the first is relating theory to practice and persevering until the true cause of a difficulty becomes evident. Most of the problems that beginning printers encounter are not the result of defective formulas, but of difficulties in coding techniques. It's so true. With whatever sort of paper is desired, albumen, arrowroot, etc., it will be necessary to get a, quote, feel for the exact method and amount of coating that will produce the best results. And it also depends on your negative, too. We'll talk about this stuff in the future. But also, coating methods which seem effortless for one person may be totally unworkable for another. For beginners, it's best to trust the formula given and focus on striving for rich, even coatings on the paper, right? Do not be afraid to try out new ideas for coating methods. Once a feel for the basic materials and coating methods is established, it is then possible to create variations on formula and fulfill the promise of creative expression with a totally unique photographic material. It's so true. I know that's just simple little words, but it's so true. These printing out processes give you the ability to really create your own thing. I think that's why we all kind of work in these historic processes, right? We take our own turns and twists on them and make them our own, which is really true. The key to success in every operation described in this book is clean and careful work. I always talk about cleanliness and being tidy and cross-contamination issues. Because of the presence of excess silver, the printing out papers are far more subject to damage from careless handling and contamination than our modern photographic papers. Yes, true, true, true. Contamination is a very real danger, and only good housekeeping practices will prevent it. Failure to clean up spills will load the air in work areas with chemical dust, and unclean trays will surely cause stains in prints. A thorough and careful approach to housekeeping in the work areas is actually part of the whole attitude that leads to good results. This attitude is one of patience and care and thoughtful attention to detail. Success will come through a process of slow refinement of results and not through discovering one right formula. That's especially in the 21st century. Everybody wants this magic bullet for this stuff, and you're just not going to get it. You're going to have to pay a little bit for this stuff. A system of record keeping is essential, both to obtain repeatable results and to understand the causes of the problems. Any work with the methods described in this book will help make a direct link with a photographic tradition from which convenience products in photographic materials have made us very distant. That's what I just said. We're so removed from this stuff, right? Respect and understanding for the achievements of early photographers cannot help but grow from acquaintance with their methods. Very good stuff. That's really a bottom line kind of look at what POP is, how it works, how we define these words. Next week, I'll do a little piece out of the book on salt printing. And then the following week, we'll do albumen printing. That's what this book is, and that's what we'll talk about. So that's kind of the lowdown on it. Any questions on those? I think it's pretty straightforward stuff, but it's always good. Hello, Oliver. Good to see you. Happy Saturday to you as well. It's always good to see a well-written, well-researched description of what these things are and how they work. It is important for us as 21st century, 2021 photographers, artists, to understand the materials we're working with, not only chemically and structurally that way, but the history of them. I think it's really important if you're doing any type of serious, quote, serious work, to understand the history of what you're dealing with, right? I can't remember the writer. He writes, I think he writes Crichton, Michael Crichton, I think is his name. He says, like, if you don't know your history, you're like a leaf on a tree. Something like you don't know you're attached to the tree kind of thing, right? You're kind of in a little bubble. This is the same thing going on here. the more we're enriched with the knowledge of the historic processes that we're working in, I think the better work we can make. And definitely you'll have more respect for what you're doing. And it may even fuel ideas and those kinds of things. So absolutely, Mr. Christian Johansson. Good. Yes, you're very welcome. I think it's always good to take time out to look at non-technical things before you go into the technical things, if you can, and see what you're, like I said, see what you're dealing with. Let's see. Peter says, Franz Osterman speaks about wet salted print process. Do you know about it? I don't know. You'd have to describe wet salted print process. It sounds like salt prints. I don't know. I don't know what you're talking about there. I don't know. Can one Chopper Carson, good to see you, brother. Can one make large albumen sheets and then cut them to smaller than sensitizer? Does the cut edge become a problem? No dumb questions. You know that, brother. Yes. In fact, that's a great way to handle making paper. When you're putting that binder, the albumen, on the paper, it's salted albumen. When you're putting that on, the larger sheets you can do, the better, because you can cut it down. You can make one float instead of 10 floats. Yes, the edge will not. You're just going to sacrifice that albuminized edge. No problem there. Great question, actually. Lenny says, on Facebook, someone asked about lavender oil, if you could use another oil. I tried the information, but it didn't find something called Canadian balls. Yes, I don't know what you're. Like lavender oil in the varnish, maybe is what you're talking about. There are other oils, but they're not as archival. Let's say they'll turn your varnish brittle, or they won't work as well. They could stain. They could do all kinds of different things. Canada balsam is absolutely a great plasticizer. That's what we're talking about here, is a plasticizer. I use Canada balsam as a plasticizer in the ferrotype mix that I make to do tintypes. That's what keeps the asphaltum flexible. I don't know if Angel Gilding uses Canada balsam, but that is definitely a good plasticizer, proven plasticizer for sure. Good question. A variation of the salted print. I don't know. No, I don't know what wet salted print process is. No, I have no idea what that is, Peter. Linda says yes. Yeah, so a plasticizer is what, for instance, in varnishing your positives or negatives, the varnish, that's what keeps the varnish from going completely brittle and basically breaking or getting little spider cracks all over in it. That lavender oil keeps it flexible, basically keeps it moist enough to where it won't crack. Canada balsam, she just asked about, is a plasticizer that works really well if you're going to make tintype or ferrotype, what I call batter or mixture, asphaltum, mineral spirits, and Canada balsam. That's the plasticizer in that. So yeah, that's good stuff. Where else are we here? You can keep asking questions if you have them, but I'm going to jump on through here. Guess what the recommended reading is today? Of course, grab that book. It's a great book. If you can find the hard copy, you can get you a hard copy. You can definitely get the PDF online. 1980, I don't know, 35, 40 years old now, maybe 50. I don't know. What is it, 45 years now? Scares me to think about, because I know 1980. So you're very welcome, Linda. My pleasure. Yes, absolutely. So grab that book. We're going to go into salt prints next week, and the following week, albumen prints. And to be honest with you, I think after that, maybe even a little bit before, but definitely after that, it's going to be all studio stuff. It's going to be all darkroom stuff. So we're going to not do any of this for a while unless I can't work in my darkroom for whatever reason. I don't know why that would be, but we'll leave the academic stuff behind for a little bit. This is really good. I wanted to share this with you and have time to watch it with you. This is from the George Eastman Museum. Well, thank you, Steve. I appreciate that. Good seeing you, brother. I'm glad you were able to drop in here. This is really interesting. This is vault to wall 1890 albumen print by Kuska B. I don't know how to say his name, Kimbai. And it just shows, excuse me, it just shows the Eastman Museum how they prep and what they go through to get an image on the wall for an exhibition. Check this out. I think you guys will like this. I'm going to mute myself.
What happens after an object is selected to be exhibited in the collection gallery? The process shown in this video is an overview of what goes into bringing an object from storage to display. First, a curator chooses an object and retrieves it from the vault. The curator examines the object and confirms title, date, medium, dimensions, and inscriptions. Next, the object is taken to the photography studio to be photographed. The digital master files will be used for a variety of purposes, such as providing images for publication or being put in our collections online. Conservators document the object's condition and determine whether any treatment is needed. For this unmounted albumen silver print, false margins applied to its edges help to reduce the curl of the thin paper. The margins also allow the photograph to be handled safely and to be displayed all the way to its edges. Next, preparators create a custom mat and frame. The photograph is put into a sealed package inside the frame. The sealed package guards against environmental factors, such as changes in humidity. It also protects the object from airborne pollutants, water damage, and pests. In the gallery, preparators carefully hang the work so that it is secure, level, and positioned correctly on the wall. Finally, a label is added next to the work. The label has identifying information about the object and text researched and written by a curator. By taking these steps, we ensure every work that will be on display is documented, protected, interpreted, and prepared for you to see in the gallery. What happens after an object is selected?
I thought that was interesting to watch that. They go through a lot of work. Imagine when your photograph's being handled and treated like a precious. I love how they call it an object. They don't even call it a photograph. They call it an object, which is it's good terminology, I think. Chopper had a question here. With trying these various methods, one will be using different chemicals in their trays. Any recommendations on what to use to deeply clean, developing, washing? You know what? That's a great question. Here's the thing: all these processes, your silver tray or your silver is going to be in a different. I recommend using glass trays and dedicating the Pyrex trays for your silver nitrate, especially, and just keep those wiped out and cleaned after you use them. Have dedicated funnels so you can get them back into the bottles. I recommend just distilled water. And if it's something that solvents need to get involved with, some alcohol to clean your trays out. I would never cross-contaminate. I would use the silver nitrate tray to float prints in and then use it to put albumen or salt sizing in it or something like that. Dedicate the trays. I recommend people do small. I'm going to do all of my tests on these negative making and negative making specifically. I'm going to do all my tests on half plate. So it's very manageable, 4x5, half plate, whatever, just so you understand what you're doing. And those are very doable. If you want to then go to the larger stuff and you'll know what you want to do. But that's a great question. That's a really good question. And then, Jeffrey says ChemQuick is a great cleaner. Let's copy that link address and I'll put it in the comments area here. Here's what Jeffrey just offered. Thanks for that, Jeffrey. We'll throw that up there. Imagine the horror if you destroy a picture at the museum. Yes, I know. I thought about that as well too, right? I mean, I noticed they're they don't even carry the image or the object. They put it on a cart and float it, transport it around. Yeah, that would be awful. But what a beautiful print, right? It was a beautiful albumen print. It looked like very well preserved. So that was a fun show to watch. I think just a few minutes just to see how they go about preparing. You can see there's 2 or 3 people involved in that, and a lot of work involved, a lot of care and dedication. So, all right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for joining me. I hope you can make it next Saturday, and we'll continue 3 parts next week's salt, following week albumen, and then we're going to jump into the dark room, like I said, and you can follow along with that if you want or not, whatever you want to do. I just appreciate everybody that showed up today. I want to wish you a happy weekend or a happy week and a good week. Stay healthy, stay happy, stay well, and I'll see you next Saturday. Bye-bye. Have a good one.